Have you ever noticed someone who seems distant, emotionally guarded, or hesitant to fully open up, yet there are moments when they can't help but think about you constantly? That's the paradox of the avoidant mind. Avoidants often pull back when things get too close, yet deep down they can ignore the connection they feel with someone who makes them feel seen, safe, and understood. The truth is, when an avoidant starts realizing that you're always on their mind, it isn't a game or manipulation. It's a sign of your impact on their world. You've entered a part of their mind that they rarely let anyone access. You've made them pause, reflect, and feel things they often try to avoid. And this is powerful, not because they finally chase you, but because you've subtly shifted their emotional patterns. The avoidant mind often fears dependency, vulnerability, or losing control. Yet, when they repeatedly think of you, it means that your presence, your energy, your understanding, your authenticity has penetrated the walls they've built. You become a safe place they can't help but revisit, even if they don't fully admit it. And that's where the magic happens. Without forcing anything, without demanding more than they can give, you've become unforgettable to them. It's important to remember that this awareness is not an immediate invitation for closeness or instant commitment. It's the beginning of a shift. When an avoidant keeps you on their mind, it's a subtle acknowledgement that they care more than they might express. Your consistency, your boundaries, and your self-respect are what allow them to see you as someone remarkable, rather than someone to fear or push away. So if you notice that an avoidant is thinking about you often, don't panic, overanalyze, or chase them. Instead, maintain your confidence, live your life fully, and let your presence continue to speak for itself. Eventually, the avoidant who has always been guarded may start to show that their thoughts are not just fleeting, they're meaningful, shaping how they feel, act, and even grow. And that's when real transformation begins for both of you. The paradox of avoidance is one of the most fascinating aspects of human relationships, especially when it comes to those who have an avoidant attachment style. People who are avoidant often present themselves as independent, self-sufficient, and emotionally distant. They may appear unbothered by the absence of closeness, often withdrawing when intimacy feels overwhelming or when they sense vulnerability creeping into the dynamic. On the surface, it can seem as though they don't care, as though they are detached and indifferent. But beneath that exterior lies a complex emotional world, one that is often misunderstood. The avoidance distance is not necessarily a lack of interest or affection. It is a mechanism they have developed consciously or unconsciously to protect themselves from the fear of being overwhelmed, hurt, or consumed by emotional intensity. This protective mechanism creates a push-pull dynamic in relationships. On one hand, they crave connection and intimacy, but on the other hand, they fear the vulnerability that comes with it. It is this tension that forms the paradox. They want closeness, but simultaneously resist it. When someone enters the life of an avoidant and starts occupying their thoughts consistently, it triggers a subtle shift. The very act of thinking about someone, replaying moments, imagining conversations, or reflecting on interactions reveals that they are emotionally engaged in a way they rarely acknowledge or show. Their mind keeps returning to this person, even if their behavior outwardly suggests detachment. It is not a conscious choice to fixate on someone. It is an involuntary recognition that this person matters. This is where the paradox becomes clear. While they may pull away in physical or emotional presence, internally they are deeply affected, wrestling with feelings they are not fully equipped to express. They may find themselves questioning their boundaries, evaluating why this person has made such a lasting impression, or contemplating their own reactions and vulnerabilities. The avoidant may experience a mix of excitement, curiosity, and anxiety all at once. Each thought about this person can trigger both longing and fear, a simultaneous desire for connection, and a compulsion to maintain emotional distance. Understanding this paradox is crucial for anyone interacting with an avoidant individual. Recognizing that their apparent aloofness does not equate to indifference allows you to approach the relationship with patience and clarity. It is the realization that being constantly on their mind is a significant indicator of emotional impact, a sign that you have broken through a barrier they typically guard fiercely. In many ways, this paradox illustrates the complexity of human attachment and the ways people protect themselves while still longing for connection. By appreciating that avoidance can think about someone consistently even while keeping physical or emotional distance, you gain insight into the subtle ways influence and impact operate in relationships. It is this very tension between avoidance and attachment that creates the conditions for eventual growth, self-awareness, and the possibility of deeper, more meaningful connections. Being impactful in someone's life, especially someone with an avoidant attachment style, is far less about grand gestures and far more about consistent authenticity. Avoidants are highly sensitive to pressure, expectation, or attempts to manipulate their emotions, which is why traditional approaches of chasing, persuading, or demanding attention often push them further away rather than drawing them closer. What truly leaves a mark on an avoidant is a person who exists fully as themselves, someone who carries confidence, clarity, and emotional stability without expecting reciprocation at every turn. This type of impact is subtle but profound, creating a space where the avoidant feels drawn in rather than cornered. When you consistently show up as your authentic self, your values, your passions, and your boundaries, it demonstrates a kind of grounded presence that avoidants rarely encounter. They are used to people either chasing them, trying to extract commitment prematurely, or reacting to their distance with anxiety. A person who remains steady, self-aware, and secure in who they are signals something different, something they can think about without feeling threatened. This creates curiosity, admiration, and even longing. The avoidant begins to notice patterns, the way you live your life with intention, the way you respect both your needs and theirs, and the way you engage without manipulation. Over time, these repeated interactions begin to form a mental and emotional imprint. They start reflecting on the moments you've shared, the calm you bring into interactions, and the sense of respect and understanding you offer. It is this consistency of authenticity that makes you unforgettable. Importantly, being impactful does not mean being perfect or controlling outcomes. Avoidants respond to subtle influence rather than overt pressure. When your actions and words are aligned, when your presence is steady and reassuring without being demanding, you demonstrate a model of connection that is safe and appealing. Over time, this creates cognitive dissonance within the avoidant. They may be wired to pull away from closeness, yet they cannot stop thinking about the person who brings stability, respect, and intrigue without imposing pressure. This is the essence of influence over someone who is avoidant, the quiet power of living fully, showing care without over-attachment, and letting your consistency speak louder than any demand or declaration could. In many ways, the impact is cumulative. Each interaction builds trust. Each display of authenticity chips away at the walls they have erected, and each moment of steady presence becomes a reference point for what a healthy connection can look like. The avoidant mind cannot help but notice these subtleties, even if they struggle to articulate or act upon them immediately. Ultimately, being impactful with someone who has avoidant tendencies is less about winning their attention in the moment and more about creating a lasting impression through your unwavering authenticity and consistent presence. It is in these quiet, deliberate actions that the avoidant begins to see you as someone exceptional, someone worth considering, and someone who has entered a rare and meaningful space in their mind. Entering the emotional world of an avoidant is not a simple task, because they are naturally inclined to protect themselves from feelings that feel overwhelming or unsafe. Avoidants often build emotional walls over time, shaped by past experiences, fear of rejection, or the need to maintain independence. They may appear distant, aloof, or disengaged, but when someone manages to occupy their thoughts consistently, it signals that these walls are being gently penetrated. This penetration is not about breaking them down forcefully or confronting their defenses aggressively. Rather, it is about creating a subtle, enduring impact through presence, consistency, and authenticity. When an avoidant repeatedly thinks about someone, it indicates that the individual has touched a part of their inner world that is rarely accessible. This part of their mind is usually reserved for themselves, carefully protected, and hidden from most relationships. For someone to reach it, they must embody qualities that make the avoidant feel seen without pressure, valued without obligation, and understood without judgment. Emotional penetration occurs gradually. Each meaningful conversation, shared moment of understanding, or demonstration of respect for boundaries chips away at the habitual caution that governs the avoidance interactions. Their mind begins to replay moments, not out of compulsion, but out of curiosity and emotional resonance. Thoughts of this person linger because they evoke feelings that are complex, unfamiliar, and often uncomfortable, but in a way that is intriguing rather than threatening. This creates a dynamic where the avoidant begins to reflect inwardly. They might question why this person occupies their mind so frequently, what it is about the interaction that feels different, or how these feelings fit into their usual pattern of emotional detachment. These reflections are often accompanied by a mix of excitement, uncertainty, and subtle longing. The avoidant is grappling with vulnerability in a way they rarely allow themselves to, and this internal processing is a sign of emotional engagement. Entering their mental space also means influencing their perspective on relationships and emotional intimacy. The avoidant begins to see connection differently, not as a threat or a burden, but as something that can coexist with independence and personal autonomy. This shift does not happen overnight. It is cumulative, built through repeated experiences that convey authenticity, reliability, and calm presence. It is important to recognize that this influence is not about forcing closeness or eliciting immediate change. Rather, it is the quiet, consistent impact that allows the avoidant to feel safe thinking about someone repeatedly, even while maintaining their natural distance. Over time, this repeated mental and emotional engagement lays the groundwork for deeper connection. By penetrating the avoidant's inner world gently and respectfully, the individual establishes a rare and meaningful presence, one that transforms the avoidant's understanding of intimacy and leaves a lasting imprint on both their thoughts and their heart. Patience and presence are the cornerstones of building any meaningful connection with someone who has an avoidant attachment style. Avoidants are often wary of closeness because they associate it with vulnerability, loss of control, or emotional overwhelm. They are conditioned to maintain distance as a form of self-protection, and any attempt to rush intimacy or demand emotional availability can trigger withdrawal. This is why patience becomes essential. It is not simply waiting, it is the conscious practice of allowing the avoidant space to engage on their own terms while maintaining your own sense of self. Patience is coupled with presence, the ability to show up consistently, authentically, and calmly without pressure or expectation. Presence signals to the avoidant that they are safe to think about, reflect on, and consider engaging with emotionally without fear of being pushed into a situation that feels too intense. Over time, this consistent presence builds trust, even if it is not immediately acknowledged. The avoidance mind starts to notice patterns, that you are reliable, that your behavior is predictable, and that your care is steady rather than conditional or reactive. This reliability is transformative because it subtly challenges the avoidant's habitual belief that closeness leads to loss of control or emotional suffocation. They begin to see that it is possible to feel connection without losing autonomy, and this realization often occurs first internally, through thought and reflection, before manifesting externally. The combination of patience and presence also allows the avoidant to feel curiosity rather than fear. When they encounter someone who is emotionally stable, self-assured, and respectful of boundaries, they begin to explore feelings and thoughts that they typically suppress. This creates a fertile ground for growth, because the avoidant no longer experiences connection as a threat, but as a safe and intriguing space. It is important to recognize that patience does not mean inaction or passivity. Being patient involves actively demonstrating your values, interests, and confidence while leaving the door open for the avoidant to engage at their own pace. Presence does not require constant communication or emotional labor beyond what feels authentic. It requires showing up as a grounded, consistent version of yourself. The impact of this approach is cumulative. Each encounter, each conversation, each demonstration of respect and understanding contributes to an internal shift within the avoidant. They begin to reassess the meaning of emotional engagement, slowly integrating the idea that connection does not equal loss of independence. This patience and presence create a safe mental space where the avoidant can process their thoughts and emotions freely, leading them to realize that your consistent attention is both meaningful and non-threatening. Ultimately, the power of patience and presence lies in their ability to create internal change without coercion. By allowing the avoidant to engage on their own terms, you give them the opportunity to think about you, reflect on their feelings, and gradually open to a connection that feels authentic, sustainable, and mutually fulfilling. When an avoidant repeatedly thinks about someone, it is more than just a fleeting curiosity. It signals the beginning of a subtle but meaningful transformation in how they experience relationships and emotional intimacy. Avoidants are naturally inclined to protect themselves from emotional intensity, often creating distance to avoid feeling vulnerable or overwhelmed. However, consistent thoughts about a particular person indicate that this individual has made a significant impression on their inner world. These thoughts are not random. They are a reflection of the avoidant engaging with emotions and experiences they usually suppress or avoid. Over time, these repeated mental engagements can lead to a shift in perception. The avoidant begins to consider the possibility that emotional closeness does not necessarily threaten their independence or autonomy. They start questioning their habitual patterns of withdrawal and resistance, often without even realizing it consciously. This internal dialogue is critical because change for an avoidant rarely comes from external pressure or persuasion. Instead, it emerges gradually as a result of repeated, consistent exposure to someone who models stability, authenticity, and respect. The thoughts that occupy their mind are like seeds being planted, slowly taking root as they begin to associate connection with safety rather than risk. They may replay conversations, analyze interactions, or imagine future scenarios, all of which contribute to a reevaluation of their emotional boundaries and beliefs about intimacy. This process is subtle and often internal, but it has profound consequences. The avoidant starts to recognize the value of someone who is patient, self-assured, and emotionally consistent. They begin to see that being on someone's mind is not about losing control, but about engaging meaningfully with another person. Over time, these reflections can lead to behavioral changes as well. The avoidant may start to open up in small ways, initiate contact, or show curiosity and care without feeling pressured to abandon their need for autonomy. Each step, no matter how small, is part of the larger transformation sparked by repeated mental and emotional engagement. Importantly, this process requires patience and respect from the other person. It cannot be rushed, forced, or manipulated, because doing so risks triggering the avoidance defense mechanisms. Instead, consistent presence, authenticity, and self-respect provide the fertile ground for this transformation to unfold naturally. Eventually, when the avoidant realizes that their thoughts of someone are not fleeting or superficial but meaningful, it signals a deeper shift in their emotional landscape. They are no longer merely occupied by fleeting curiosity. They are actively engaging with feelings, reflections, and possibilities that were once off limits. This is the moment where mental preoccupation transforms into emotional awareness, laying the foundation for genuine connection. It is through this process that the avoidant begins to recognize that consistent thoughts and emotional engagement can coexist with independence, leading to more balanced, authentic, and potentially fulfilling relationships in the future. In conclusion, understanding an avoidance mind requires patience, presence, and respect for their boundaries. But when you consistently show authenticity and emotional steadiness, you leave a lasting impact that they cannot ignore. Their repeated thoughts of you are a quiet acknowledgement of your significance, a reflection of the trust and curiosity you inspire, and the beginning of a deeper emotional shift. By honoring both your own worth and their pace, you create the conditions for meaningful connection without force or pressure. Thank you all for taking the time to listen, reflect, and explore this fascinating dynamic with me today. I truly appreciate your attention and openness.